not based on any religious teaching, but to do the humanities, the arts, sciences, and other things. What are you fighting against? I think that all of you are well aware that Al-Qaeda is not an organization, it is a hydra. And that hydra pops up a new head wherever it can, no matter how small the new head will be compared to the older heads. But they operate out of cells. They do not have a homogeneous body. They create opportunity. On the wings of opportunity, they create, I beg your pardon, their opportunity and their striking requirements. So what's happening is they came into Swat. They came in with exactly 40 people. They managed to go in, slit throats, capture some young boys, etc., and raise themselves to a few hundred. But you must remember they bring outsiders because locals will not go through this brutal aspects of the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. So they bring in outsiders. They frighten places into being subjective to them. People get frightened. And this is why, despite them constantly saying, don't leave these areas, people in the millions left the area. Swat itself has 1.2 million people in the Mingora district area. In Shangla, they'll have another million. In Bunair and Dir, which are also affected areas. There'll be about 4 to 5 million diaspora. Half of it has come down. And half of it that has come down is frightened out of its wits. And that's the real struggle. It's not a question of winning. I think this is going to take a little longer. You will have to rehabilitate people, re-secure people. Taliban will not fight to the finish. They're not that sort of people. They live to fight another day. They'll try and crop their head up again. But what it needs to be met with is a strong, very strong presence of people for some time who can protect civilians, who can recreate normalcy in their lives, could be able to create a future for them within their own areas and bring back normalcy through giving them some of the benefits that they may not have had earlier, which will convince them to be more towards our way of thinking of the civilized world rather than otherwise.
First is to underscore the fact that this is a major humanitarian crisis. The level of displacement is on the scale of Rwanda, Bosnia, Darfur. There are lots of debates about the numbers, but the scale is very clear. The UN now has registered IDPs, internally displaced people, in the range of 2.4 million, and are quite confident there are hundreds of thousands more. So order of magnitude, 3 million uprooted people who have had to flee their homes with very little. These people now are, a fraction of them are in camps that are managed by the United Nations High Commission of Refugees and NGOs like the IRC. There are 21 such camps. The IRC is active in 6 of the largest ones. But what is really important to note is that only about 10% of the displaced people are in those camps. Or to put it the other way around, 90% are staying in villages with relatives, with friends. So the pressures are not just the serious dangers that the IDPs experience, the internally displaced people experience, but also the host communities, which are not rich communities that nonetheless are seeking to accommodate this many people.
I mean, because we're talking of Dir, you're talking of Bunair, you're talking of Malakan, you're talking of Jandol, you're talking of various areas which have gone through.
But it's very important for people to go back home in order to, how would I put it, restore a normal government situation.
Absolutely correct, but it's also very important that it be safe when they go, and that's
security is crucial. Yeah.
I think to begin with, it's too early to go back. I think yet it's just a bit too early. The crucial point is that standing crops were left a month ago when this action started, and a lot of people have lost next year's feed. Now, for areas where that is a major way of life, that's going to be terrible.
Well, I think at this point, the hopes of our people on the ground are, let's say, restrained. I wouldn't claim that they're nearly as optimistic as much of what one reads over in our press. But there is, at the moment, no alternative except that basic security be reestablished by the Pakistani military. What would I think be very damaging would be if the Pakistani military took the further step of leading the charge for relief initially and then reconstruction afterwards. And
well, let me answer that first of all by saying that history is replete with examples. Catherine the Great being the greatest of them, where everyone knew her background and she led Russia into a renaissance. But I'm not going into it from that point of view. What I'd like to tell you is, number one, the international community is monitoring everything they're giving Pakistan now, not since just recently, but since quite some time now. And everything is being done project-wise, even Friends of Democratic Pakistan. It's specific to projects and development that is being laid out. Similarly, the American help which is coming is project-specific in most cases, etc. Well, as far as people's phobias are concerned, I'm sure they're there, and they will be there whether we ask for it or not. But I think that the humanitarian situation is so great that it can't be overlooked. And now we have one thing in the world that makes it a little difficult. When these funds are being given project specific, you've got NGOs monitoring, you've got the donors monitoring, and you've got media monitoring.
Is this a dichotomy or is it a discrepancy? And for the UN, what does this mean? Because the UN had banned.
I thought we emulate you in many a way. We've just had a Chief Justice restored by public popular support against what they consider to be government's thought. It's a major, it's a tour de force in our change. Now, that Chief Justice decides that here is a man who need not be arrested. And why did he decide that? Because the UN mandated proscription, not arrest. The arrest was the Pakistan government's zealousness in the matter. So when they look through the papers, and I'm at the UN, there's no question of an arrest. When people go through this process, they can't travel, they can't exchange monies, and they cannot control the institutions that they were controlling earlier. But there's no question of arrest unless the UN ordains it. In this matter, I don't think the UN had ordained arrest. So if the Supreme Court on that particular aspect which I read, let him go, now you tell me whether they should or shouldn't. And whether
in India as well. And they're trying to make sure that all of the participants, all of the stakeholders, all of the governments of the countries involved in this are consulting to deal with the various different perceptions that each have of each other. And I understand the perception that you describe. I don't myself know how much of it is accurate, but there are all kinds of perceptions that counter each other and that have to be dealt with. And I think that Dick Holbrooke, for example, our former chairman, who has been sucked into this huge job, which he loves, by the way, is fully cognizant of these various different elements and perceptions. And all I can say is that the international community and the people who are handling the problems on the ground have to face up to them.